how can we like get a little bit more out of these quints? So we pressed them, we made a cider with the juice, and then we took the pomace and we put that like carbonic quince pomace into spirit for about 6 weeks, and made this like quince-infused spirit, basically. And of course, the carbonic maceration is going to elevate some of those naturally like fruitier and juicier notes of the quince too.
Absolutely.
Hello, my name is Ria Wincaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. Bringing us into this here episode, number 405 of Cider Chat, we heard from Tariq Ahmed. He is the founder and cider maker at Revel Cider. It's an Ontario-based cidery. It's located to the west of Niagara Falls, about an hour out. You'll be hearing all about the location. What he was talking about when we first started this episode was working with quince, which is a fruit related to apples and pears. It's a very hard fruit. It's yellow and doesn't mash really well like a pear or an apple would. And so makers who want to ferment quince are often like scratching their head and saying, how do we do that? What do we do? You know, it will ruin our press, our grinder. And boy, did he do a great option, which is called carbonic maceration. He's going to be talking more about that cider making technique once we get into this featured conversation and how it worked well with quince. So do stay tuned for that. Before we get there, I have a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. Cider Chat is currently in season 9, and that means there's over 400 episodes in the archives at ciderchat.com. So if you're looking for an interview with a particular maker, just go to the search button there, put the name of the maker or the brand in, or the particular technique that you're looking for, and it's a pretty good chance that it's going to pop up. And you'll see a link, and you'll be able to go to that podcast and find the show notes and also find the website for that particular maker or that orchardist. It's a resource for people. That's what Cider Chat has always been, and a little more so because we also offer tours. And we are really ramping up this year in 2024 cross-promotion. So each week, hopefully, I'll be able to talk about a new cidery, a new place that has participated in cross-promotion. And just since like last week's episode and this week, we've seen 3 different makers do this. We saw Green Bench Mead and Cidery, which is based in St. Petersburg, Florida. You can listen to episode 398 with Brian Wing from Green Bench talking about making cider down in Florida, of all places, and quality cider to boot. So definitely check that out. Once again, that's episode 398. We also saw Ross Cider and Perry Company. They were just featured. Their current episode, number 404 on the podcast, and they reposted a photo and mentioned that they were featured on Cider Chat. So that super helps people be able to delve into what's up with Ross Cider and Perry. And there is a lot going on there. They have a bounty of events that happen all year round, and their variety, their single varietal ciders are amazing. In fact, that episode really spurred on a maker by the name of Steve Wood. Now, if you've been in this industry for a while, you might have heard of Steve Wood. I certainly hope you have. He and Louisa Spencer are behind Farnham Hill Cider, based in New Hampshire. So it's just to the north of where I am in New England. I have visited their cidery. We do have a number of episodes featuring Farnham Hill. And Steve heard that episode with Albert Johnson, last week's episode 404. And then he hunted down, he went into the show notes, and he hunted down the previous episode I did with both Albert and his father, Mike Johnson, and listened to that. And it inspired Steve enough. And Steve, if you're listening, you really floored me, man. I mean, he called up to thank me for that work on Cider Chat. It was so cool. So that's what cross-promotion does. I mean, you know, look, I've talked to Steve Wood on the phone, but it's kind of a rare one. Anybody in the know that Steve calls you up for that kind of compliment, you know you must be doing something right. So that was super awesome, and that's how cross-promotion rolls. So another thing we saw was Allagash Cidery. They were featured in episode 306. That was in season 8. A really great episode all on building a cidery and what they're doing right now in the Netherlands. It's certainly a country that I have my eyes on for a lot of reason. Well, what they did was download the info flyer all about Cider Chat and posted it in their tasting room, took a photo, and sent it our way so we could see that they were doing cross promotion. That helps their patrons learn more about cider because there's a whole bunch of episodes featuring the Netherlands, not just Allagash. And Allagash, the two makers there, they're smart enough to know that if there's just one cidery, you're kind of pushing up against a hill. But the more cideries you have surrounding you, the more your state, your country in this case, becomes a destination. And that's what's happening there. When I first started traveling to the Netherlands, there wasn't really any cider, to speak of. I could count on my hand, if that. And now they just had the cider salon just a couple weeks ago in Amsterdam. And by the end of this year, we're going to be collecting all these stories that we have here and talking about them again, continuing with the cross promotion. I am using the hashtag XPromoteCider, which is short for cross promote cider. And sometimes I put on 2024, but really, it's going to go beyond 2024 because this is a long-term goal. I think it's in people's forefront, but we are a small niche community, and anything we can to kind of keep on raising all our ships together is really the best way to go. So do join the fun and do send those cross-promote photos this way. Tag Cider Chat Ciderville on Instagram or any of the social media channels, and we'll be able to share it here on the podcast.
Walking through the orchards.
It is time once again for the New York International Cider Competition. This year is the 6th annual NYI Cider Competition, and it will be held the first week of April 2024. Top trade buyers, including importers, distributors, retailers, and craft beer bar owners, will be judging the ciders in a blind taste test by its category and the current price of the cider submitted. Ciders are judged by top trade buyers in the industry, as if they were buying for their own business. As a result, cider brands get insider info on how their ciders rate for retail shelves in terms of style, price point, and taste.
Your ciders do not have to be sold in New York or the United States. The New York International Cider Competition is open to all commercially produced ciders from around the world. Winners of this cider competition receive a 2-inch physical medal, a digital image of their medal, and a numerical score.
For more info and registration, go to nyicidercompetition.com and sign up today.
The New York International Cider Competition is a proud sponsor of Cider Chat. Submit your cider today. Go to nyicidercompetition.com, that's nyicidercompetition.com, and help keep cider going up.
I have a little email here I've been hanging on to for the past week or so, and I think this is the right time to talk about it because we are talking about the world of cider and all of us involved in it. And this letter comes from our friend Marcel, who has a cidery, which is almost essentially on the border of Germany, the location. So if you're looking at the Netherlands, and most people know where Amsterdam is, I'm saying it as I would if I was in the Netherlands. We say Amsterdam, right? And interestingly, if you're in New York City, New York City could have been called New Amsterdam. The Dutch made a big impact in this region here. And a lot of those little villages around Long Island, like, Flushing. Well, down in the Netherlands, in an area called Zeeland, is a city called Vlissingen. And that is really like, two peas in a pod, all related. This, we think our world is so big, but really we're so interconnected. Anyways, Marcel is writing on here. He writes that dihannenaar means grower, as in horticulturist. So he's talking about the different dialects in this area. And they get scrambled up everywhere. His wife that he's been married to for 20 years, she will still say one word from her dialect, and he'll be wondering what she's saying, or vice versa. And he talks about, that they do live really close to the German border. And if they just drive an hour into Germany and they go into the old city center of Cologne, they'll find people there will speak his native Venlo dialect. So how language travels around is really interesting. And of course, he brings it back to apples. And he says for the past 5 years, he's been picking apples in very different orchards from all over this one small province in Limburg. And it has, a whole range of different terroir, the soil in this case, sand, clay, wet, dry, everything in between. And the apples, he writes, are so diverse. But what really hit him was the location and the ciders that were made from those locations, in that he will have the same apple variety and be in one orchard and then go 20 meters from that orchard to another orchard and get the same apple, produce some cider, and those two ciders are as diverse as the dialects of the different people of those regions. That is fascinating. We are now kind of dipping into, and we get this info from somebody like Marcel, who's telling us, yes, I'm seeing this with terroir in my neighborhood. One orchard on one side of the street, you go to the other side of the street, totally different. That's what we have seen in Bordeaux, in these different regions. I mean, yowza, that is what we are slowly looking for. So thank you so much for writing about that, Marcel. I think the dialect is good. I'm glad that you like my Dutch, but I'm really excited to hear where you have the same variety, two different orchards close together, and different ciders. Boy, that is so stinking cool. Anyways, he finishes with, thanks again for the wonderful powerhouse of cider insights that Cider Chat has become. Marcel. Well, if you have thoughts on this topic or, anything out there in Ciderville, always love hearing from you, and certainly appreciate everything. Marcel and all the folks who are patrons of this here podcast who help keep this podcast going out every single week for the past 9 years. It's just incredible. You too can become a patron. Join the Cider Chat Patreon page. That's spelled Patreon, or hit the donate button at ciderchat.com. This is listener supported, and it's listeners like Marcel, the folks at Ross on Y, Cider and Perry Company, Brian Wing, so many others, the folks at Allagasse Cidery, who have all been patrons of Cider Chat, believing in what we're doing, sending the message out, and this is why we get these beautiful emails. When I come back, we're going to be going to our featured conversation with Tariq Ahmed of Revel Cider in Guelph, Ontario. So, my friends, this is a very, very good time to grab a glass and join this chat. Tariq, I'd like to welcome you to Cider Chat. You have been somebody, I want to give you a little bit of a backstory. When I went up to Ontario with Ryan Monkman, he sponsored Cider Chat to come up, and this was 2017, maybe it's 2018. It's around there, somewhere around there, and soon after, I got an email from somebody that knew you. I don't know if he worked with you or he was in the area, and he said, you gotta check out this cider maker and what he's doing. Oh, that's funny. Okay. And so, what year did you start?
2014.
2014, yeah. So you were full on then. And I was like, okay. And so over that time, I've been watching. Soon after the world shut down and there's trade things or whatever, product going back and forth, and couldn't come down to the U.S. and just saying, okay, what's going on? And I'm on your email list for your newsletter, and getting your beautiful little soliloquies of poetry in a little email, and these interesting products that you're making. And so I'm super thrilled to have you on the podcast to finally meet the person behind that original email. And whoever that listener is out there in Ciderville, I want to thank you for encouraging me to know about you.
Yeah, thanks for me as well. Yeah.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? All these people are out there wanting the success of an operation and believing in the person. And that's The goose with the golden egg.
is really kind. Yeah,
lovely. So in this conversation, for our purposes, we want to get into knowing a little bit more like where you're located, and we're going to talk a little bit about the terroir and how your site, your production facility is set up, and your fermentation styles. And I'm saying that, do you consider yourself as a cider maker? How do you describe what your job title is?
Oh man, yeah.
A poet in the bottle?
Yeah, it's funny. I do like to write, but typically, I guess I've described myself as a cider maker, but as I feel like anyone who owns a small business or who knows someone that does, you have a lot of different hats that you wear. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like running the business, so it's like I guess you'd be the owner and cider maker. Would that be the short answer to it?
If I'm filling out paperwork, I write founder. But,
yes, okay, founder, that totally works. I get it. All right, so we got that cleared. Let's go back to or how do you pronounce Guelph?
Guelph.
Guelph.
Yeah.
See, I always need help.
No problem.
Guelph. When I was in Ontario, they were helping me with this. Guelph. Everybody knows I have a speech impediment, so I have to go there. And I recall it's very flat up there in Ontario, but there's also like a big outcropping of mountains and a certain type of...
Yeah, the escarpment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is that stone? Or it's
limestone.
Limestone, which is really unique. And it's stunning as you're driving up from Niagara up to Toronto.
Totally.
It really sticks out in the distance, and these like white cliffs, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like are quite proud of that little geographical feature in Ontario. Yeah, we don't really have anything in the way of mountains or anything like that, and we're not on the coast with a beautiful ocean to look at. So the escarpment is I guess where we hang our hat for sure.
And that certainly impacts your soil and terrain. So just for location, it is located between where Niagara Falls is. If folks were coming over the border there. And it's about how long of a drive?
Maybe an hour and a half. From the border, yeah.
Really nice. There's different cideries to stop along the way, and then heading to your site, and then you'd be shooting up to Toronto, which is how far they flew in?
So Toronto is about an hour east of us.
Okay, so an hour in either direction, and out in that beautiful region. The actual soil, how does that impact like some of the products that you're making, the apples? And
we get fruit from right across Ontario, but our apples are primarily actually getting grown in Bedford, Ontario, by a farm called the Twin Pines Orchard. And so they supply a couple of different cideries, and they make their own cider as well. But they're pretty close to Lake Huron, which, it just being in Canada, things are quite cold, and so the fruit all tends to be grown close to these larger bodies of water, so you get that lake effect. But the soil itself, oh my goodness, this is taking me way back. I went to school for plant science, and I feel like I talked to farmers a lot, but I actually didn't go into agriculture myself like I had planned. But limestone will raise the pH of the soil, so limestone itself is just calcium carbonate. So with apples, you can have, I think, some challenges, and I'm not a grower. I want to preface that, but I believe there are some disease challenges you can have depending on where the pH of your soil is, and also it'll affect the nutrient uptake of the plants as well. Yeah,
I've heard from. It's a Niagara Wine Institute, or the college there where they teach winemaking.
Yeah.
Is that the name of it?
So there's Niagara College, and there's also Brock University, which have a bit of a wine program. And
there's so much wine being produced in that region, and I think they refer to it as like the Napa Valley of North America or Canada there.
Yeah.
And so already you got it going on there, right? Because you're doing co-ferments and working with a terroir that really lends to a specific, probably really higher quality than might be in some regions where the soil isn't as adaptable for vines to be growing in apple trees.
Yeah, I do think that it's important to encompass even that part of a terroir, and just like we use so much more than just apples and other fruits as well. We're using a lot of botanicals too, and foraging. Certain plants are going to grow better in different environments, and I think it's really important for me just to, in the products that we make, just to be able to say, hey, these things also have value, even though it might not come from the quote-unquote Napa Valley of Ontario or whatever, right? Like this part of the ecosystem is still really valuable and something that I want to shine a light on.
Let's flow to your journey to cider making. So you went to plant science, that was your course study. How did you come to the place that you are now?
So coming out of high school, I wanted to be a farmer, and I went to the University of Guelph, took plant science, and in second year, started to realize that I was learning a lot of things out of textbooks, but I wasn't really getting the actual mental and physical aspect of being on a farm.
Right.
And so I went and did an internship on an organic farm, probably about 40 minutes south of Guelph. And I chose that farm in particular because they not only had plants, and they were primarily an organic vegetable farm, but they also had quite a few different animals and a few fruit trees on the property as well. So they had chickens and pigs and horses and cattle, and they were practicing different permaculture techniques as well, and it was field and forest, and just like I knew I was going to get exposure to all of these different aspects of agriculture, and I was quite interested in organics as well. At the time, the University of Guelph, which is it's like the agricultural university in Canada, they really just had one organic course. And
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm a little, wait, bit of pause on that one. The agricultural school for Canada, we're not talking about a small country here.
No.
Maybe in population relative
Yeah.
to the U.S., but wow.
Yeah, so at the time they only
course?
had the one course.
When was this, like 1950? You're not that old.
I started there in 2011 or 2012.
My goodness.
Yeah.
I've come a long way, baby. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so just being interested in organics, I went to live on this farm, and they had what they called a focus for their interns, and it was like a self-directed project that you would do every Saturday in your time off. And so I chose fermentation and actually started by fermenting pickles and kind of doing these naturally fermented sauerkrauts and just, different vegetables in their little outdoor kitchen. And we would go in. They had actually just taken over a field next to them the year that I did my internship there that previously was conventionally farmed. And we're switching it over to organics, and that farm had been... Oh my goodness, what is the term here? When you plant one thing one year and another thing another year.
Rotational?
They had, so that field had been rotating horseradish and corn. And so when they took that field over, there were still like little pockets of horseradish growing, and so I would go and forage the leaves and add those to the pickles and the sauerkraut just to give them some tannin so that they stay crisp. And yeah, of course, when fruit started to come available, I think it was mulberries was maybe the first thing. I did a mulberry wine, and started to get into alcoholic fermentations there. Went back to school. I ended up doing a couple of things. So I started working in a restaurant, and I would take some of the kegs home when they were empty, and I would start. I was like continuing in this like fermentation interest, and so I was buying single varieties of different apples at the farmers market, and kind of made good friends with one of the farmers there. And I would press these single varieties just to see what I would get out of each apple variety. Took some of these kegs home from the restaurant, borrowed them. I did return them eventually, and I would put these carboys that I had fermented into the kegs, and I would end up actually. I had bought some murder mystery scripts, and I would get my friends to act and basically run a cash bar all night and sell enough to my pals to be able to buy some more fruit the next weekend.
Yeah, enterprising.
So it was just, we were having fun.
They're helping you get more ingredients for the next batch, right?
Totally.
Yeah, supporting a friend running a party.
Yeah.
I'm winking to Terry because it's not necessarily Canadian government. That was a really long time ago, back in the 1950s.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so that was a ton of fun. At that point in time, I was like, okay, even if I still want to be a farmer, which was what I was still thinking at that point, I was like, I don't necessarily actually need this degree. So I just started to take different courses that I was interested in. And so I started to take some animal courses, which weren't strictly part of the plant science program, and ended up taking a few different fourth-year courses when I was in third year, one of which was a course where you came out of it with a business plan, basically.
Fantastic.
I'd never taken any kind of business education at all. None of my family has any background doing that either, but it felt like a fun kind of exercise to see, okay, what would a cidery like actually look, and give me an excuse to like flesh that out a little bit,
Cool.
even if I wasn't going to continue with it. But what ended up happening was the university that year launched an incubator program where so someone from the business college came to that course towards the end of it and was like, if any of you want to like actually continue and make a go of your business, we're giving away some money. You have to come and pitch your business, but you have to submit your business plan. We choose who gets to pitch and whatnot. So I did all of that and ended up winning a little grant from the University of Guelph. And then basically, if someone's going to give you some cash to do it, you have to at least start.
You got to go for it, yeah.
I started. Obviously, this anything in this industry requires like a ton of cash because you're basically building essentially a manufacturing facility. And so what I ended up doing was I actually rented space from another cider company in Ontario for the first 2 years, and I was able to use their equipment to make my own product. And so I didn't have to start by getting all of the licenses or all of the equipment up front. I had a couple of years to use cash from sales to continue to buy pieces here and there. And then I was still in school at the time and also working part-time in a restaurant, living with 4 roommates. And so the cost of living was low, which was nice. It allowed all of the rest of it to happen. And also just having a bunch of friends in school that thought it was a fun thing to do, and that were coming.
Who doesn't want to be your friend,
They were there,
goodness.
So everyone
you need
was
a fermenter in your life. Cool.
Yeah, so they all came and helped, and helped me.
So fast forward to that, learning that business plan, and seeing a little bit of some of your more recent emails, this like past couple months. Things were a little tough for the business, and I'm wondering about that initial business plan on how. I'm sure it has changed, but that foundational work, has that helped you do some of the problem solving that's necessary, or do you feel you needed more than what you initially got to maneuver through this time? Is it like, oh man, I wish they taught me this, because it's not, or you can't learn this in a book?
Right, yeah.
I don't know.
I feel like anyone who's wrote a business plan ever will tell you that it's a work of fiction entirely. And so I wouldn't say that was like a foundational piece for how I've even operated the business 6 months after writing
You wrote
that
it?
plan.
Okay.
So it really wasn't foundational piece of anything, although it did get me that first grant. Yeah, I guess just to give some background on everything that's happened. So we've been around for nearly 10 years now, and last year ran into a very challenging moment where we completely ran out of cash. I say we. I own the whole thing still. Revel doesn't have any investors or anything, and I've bootstrapped it the entire way through. Basically, just selling a few bottles here and there, and then being able to grow slowly over the last decade. But so we ran out of cash completely. Basically, I guess we should go back a little bit further.
Sure.
Going into, or I guess just before the pandemic, I had already launched an online store. And we were seeing some things in Ontario where the taxes on the wholesale side of the business, got really high. And they had basically doubled since I had started the business. And I was looking around, I was like, okay, like literally we would have to double production with the 2 people that were in the business, me and 1 employee at the time, just to stay flat with this taxation change. And we're like, that's just not going to work. And so we're like, okay, the government taxes different channels differently. And so having the direct-to-consumer side of things, they were only taking 10% of those sales versus 40% of your wholesale sales. And it was pretty clear that we needed to find a way to sell direct-to-consumer. And we had already been selling wholesale for 4 years or so. So people were reaching out, emailing us, hey, how do I drink your stuff at home? I can only get it in bars and restaurants. And we hadn't been able to sell it to them that way because the rule was you had to have 5 acres of orchard. You had to have a production facility attached to 5 acres of orchard in order to sell direct-to-consumer.
It's a unique thing in Canada.
In Ontario specifically.
Yeah, specifically. I've heard that from the folks up at Prince Edward County.
Yeah. And so that rule has actually changed, but we were the first ones and the only ones, as far as I know, to be able to get around that rule by leasing land instead of owning it because I started business when I was 21 years old, and I certainly did not have the cash to buy land, and land has continued to get a lot more expensive, so there was just never a possibility for me to be able to buy a farm. And so I went to Twin Pines actually and said, hey, you have 50 acres of fruit, and obviously you make cider, but they have a little shed as well. And I was like, can I just
Lease
on
that.
paper lease 5 acres and your little shed and get that licensed as a production facility, even though I'm not really going to be using that as like the primary facilities in Guelph, obviously.
Wow.
And so, had a long conversation with the lawyers of the AGCO, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, and I was like, this is what I want to do. It fits all your boxes. It doesn't say that, none of the rules say you have to own the land. They just say that you have to have, and they were like, you know what, like, we don't make the rules, we just enforce them, and it sounds like you have a way to fulfill everything, and so
Fantastic.
go for it, basically.
I love these happy stories with these like governing bodies. You got through that obstacle.
So we got through that obstacle. That was December of 2018, actually. We launched the online store. And I remember me and my one staff member at the time, we were canning some cider. We had the contract canning guys in. And we launched the online store, and we were like both taking cans off of the line and watching the Shopify sales come in on our phones. And it was just, oh my God, there's so many people that have been like waiting for us to be able to sell this to them and finally find a way to do it. And we still didn't have a tasting room or any like physical bottle shop. It was all strictly online and then selling to bars and restaurants.
Since 2018.
Since December of 2018.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. So you must have one part of your production area that's just for shipping.
Totally. Yeah.
That
So
has to be
shipping's a big
dedicated.
part of the business now.
Yeah, instead of a tasting room.
Yeah, so we do have a tasting room now,
No.
but that's only been open 3 months. But
How's that going?
It's breaking even now, which is great. But
It's the winter. It's the winter, right? So not bad to break even in the middle of the winter.
Yeah, and I think for a tasting room that's just open, like great. But a physical space is like not my forte. Like because we've existed, I shouldn't say without a physical space, but just without one that you could visit for such a long time. The storytelling component, the newsletters, and just like our digital, I guess, presence has been like quite important for Revel's existence because that was really driving the ship for a long time there. And then obviously COVID happened. The restaurants all shut down, but e-commerce went bonkers, and we actually I think our revenue close to tripled. And it was also much higher margin because, again, we weren't paying the 40%, we were paying the 10%. Was able to hire a lot of folks to help just both in making the product, but also in packing and getting these orders at the door. And rode that 2020, 2021, and then bars and restaurants started to come back a little bit, but it was quite challenging because we went to this point where we were actually like able to have a team because the margins were so much higher in that one sales channel, and then things shifted back to the wholesale side of things. And don't get me wrong, I love our bar and restaurant customers. They very much built this business, right? We don't have investors, we have customers. But at the same time, the way the government has structured things, that is not really a financially feasible way to operate with the number of staff that I had. What we ended up doing, this was early 2022, saw the writing on the wall a little bit with, okay, this e-com thing is not going to last. So we've been talking about building a tasting room. We wanted to do it. We've never really had the cash to do it, but now the numbers support us going to the bank and getting a loan. So we got our first, I got our first loan early 2020 to specifically build out the tasting room, but ended up using a lot of that cash to paper over things, operation, and keep people on a lot longer than I could really afford to. So that's tough. You don't want to lay anyone off, but
You get pushed up against the wall if there's no money.
Yeah, and so I certainly rode that, using that loan to do that a lot longer than I should have, and we basically ran out of cash entirely. And so at that point in time, this was early October of last year, I had to lay off a significant chunk of the team. Basically about half of the folks that we had on the production end of things, and made that public because I've always been like quite open with our customers about how things are going and how I'm feeling.
And people have responded to that.
And they really did. Yeah, folks really showed up for us, and that was fucking incredible. Honestly.
But
You're
you're not over the hump. Imagine that this is like only the beginning, so that this is a call out there to folks interested in Revel Cider and what you're doing there and the uniqueness of what you're doing there to take a look at that online store. And it's a great way to support both a business, but also all those apple trees and all the fruit trees. So it's bigger than Revel Cider. It's farmers and orchardists. And
it's so appreciated. We are in a much better spot than we were. Like there is now a path forward, or at least it feels like there is. Whereas, in early October, it was like, this was very much like nothing left to lose kind of scenario.
Yeah. Oh, that's scary. Glad you're on the other side of it.
Yeah, so on the other side of it, still figuring out what the right path is moving forward. I'm having like a few different conversations with folks that reached out that have a bit of money and were like, hey, we're big fans of Revel and would really like to see it continue, and would you be open to taking on some investment at all? And so, like more actively having those conversations now that I told everyone like, I'll talk to you in January because like I need to get through the holidays. Like this is an important time for us, and we need to sell a lot of product right now. And so
you got some big decisions ahead of you because that's a whole other podcast episode.
My feelings around it have changed a lot. Maybe I'll just touch on it briefly because, as you say, it's probably a different podcast. But the way I'm thinking about it a lot more lately, because I used to very much feel the same way, like don't want to, sell out, so to speak. And I think that's a very like common feeling, especially in this like kind of craft beverage space. But if you think about it, like from the perspective of a musician, who are just another type of artist, ultimately, any musician that got to some level of success would probably say to themselves, hey, I probably need a manager now. And like, just so I can continue to focus on the creative thing that I'm passionate about and, have someone be able to deal with all the bullshit that comes along with it. And not only that, but also, get that person into the right rooms, having the right conversations with people and just in front of the right folks as well. And like talent really, of course, in some way making a lot of these blends, but also really telling the story of Revel and of all of these different species and life forms that are part of Revel. And I think finding someone who can be the right operational partner and allow me to do what I'm good at would be a lot better for me mentally.
May it be. We wish you the best of luck on that in 2024. Keep on manifesting what you want and asking for it, and it will come. That's really how I move through life. I wouldn't still be doing the podcast if I really seriously thought about it. Sometimes passion is both a strength and a limitation, but it's who we are, so run with it.
Totally. And if it doesn't happen, like there's still a path forward. I'm sure. Otherwise, that our customers have created. So
good. One step in front of the other foot. All right, let's get into a little bit about your cider making techniques used at Revel, and have they changed since 2014?
Totally, yeah.
In what way?
Back in 2014, and really like that first year in particular, I was learning how to make cider commercially from the person I was renting space from, and from that cidery basically. And they were pitching yeast and filtering and back sweeping, and so I did all of those things the first year, even though that wasn't how I was doing it on the farm. And then, year two in their space, started to mess around with a couple of spontaneous fermentations. And then quickly that became the entire business because that was really where my passion lied. At this point in time, everything is wild fermented. We're not filtering anything, but we're also using so much more than just the fruit that grows around us. We go and forage spruce resin, and we go and forage different flowers, and we grow wormwood and all of these other interesting ingredients that we put in. And it's really going off of this idea of there are so many things that grow around us that are edible and special. And I think we, and like the broader we, not just in Canada, but around the world, we all go to the grocery store and we basically buy the same or some iteration of the same 20 species. And sometimes they're maybe grown locally and sometimes they're grown around the world and shipped in. And that's all well and good, but we walk past all of these things in our day-to-day life that I think it's important to shine a light on, especially in this time where we're obviously having some quite large climate challenges, and I'm not going to be able to solve that on my own. But if I can help reconnect folks to the things that are growing around them, I think, just showing, hey, you should maybe take a look at that little flower that you never knew what it was. Help folks realize that what exists in their backyard is special. That feels like doing my small part.
Absolutely, yeah. And we need that reminder that it is special.
Yeah.
So you've had some changes since then, and you work now with the native ambient yeast, right? So
Yeah.
what do you wish you knew back in 2014 with that you know now?
Yeah. So we had a lot of challenges that I think other folks doing naturally fermented things face, where you have a lot of volatility issues, and then also pea or mousiness can be a large challenge. And just you've got to manage these fermentations carefully. And so whether that is ensuring that you're excluding oxygen, or that's really the biggest thing in a lot of cases, right? That's what's going to lead to both mousy issues. Obviously, mouse is initially caused by bacteria or Brettanomyces, but Brettanomyces also can clear that up. But also Brettanomyces or those bacteria need oxygen in order to create that. So you can have those things living in your cider, and the same thing with volatility. Like, you can have that living in your cider, but if you are good enough about excluding oxygen, whether that is through literally purging your tanks or some careful use of sulfur, that you can mitigate these issues. A big part of, I think, folks thinking when they're trying to do these natural fermentations is like, how can we use zero sulfur entirely? And I would be an advocate of a little bit goes a really long way. Even 15 parts going to solve a lot of problems. And we don't put sulfur in everything, but
It's part of the process for you, and it's working, and you got to make it work.
Yeah.
You do what you got to do, and you're not dosing it to that extreme. We're
Totally.
going to get it on the nose. So that's the native yeast piece. I was curious, and I have a sense of this, but I want to hear it from you, or not go with assumptions. But what is the best part of Revel for you?
The best part of Revel for me is really being creative, and whether that is in the form of making a new blend, or it's the form of telling the story of something new that we've blended, or and how it tastes, or a new ingredient. Those are the points where I'm happiest.
That's just the beauty of this kind of artistry in fermentation, which kind of leads me to looking at your work over time and reading how you're writing about it. You see yourself as like an ephemeral artist in a way. Is that true, or is that?
Yeah, I've always thought of Revel as an art project, and maybe that has led to some of our business challenges, challenges as a business. But if Revel is an art project, then by definition I'm an artist. I've certainly thought of myself as an artist for a long time.
You let it flow on the page, right? You don't write your classic newsletter, and I'm really encouraging listeners out there in Ciderville to sign up for that, because it's just a delight, and you're pretty prolific too.
Thanks,
you're kicking it out. I wish I could say the same thing about Cider Chat, but we're going to get the podcast out, but not all the writing piece, and it's savory. You mull over the words, and you're bringing us through your words into that bottle, or into that ferment, if you will.
Yeah, and every bottle of the cider at least has a couple paragraphs of stuff on the back in like the tiniest font, because I'm trying to fit a novel on each thing. But I do like to write. I really like to read as well, and those are probably related.
A little bit about that writing piece. Where do you normally do that work? And is it with that glass in hand and trying to define it?
You have the Notes app on your phone. I thought a lot about just a creative process lately. This is contradictory, especially to a lot of what I write, where the concept of time and place is such an important thing, especially when we're talking about making these products that with these ingredients that are available once a year. And because they're only available once a year, maybe I get 60 chances in a lifetime to actually work with each of these ingredients. And that feels like really precious, and that concept feels like really important to any fermenter, I feel. But especially, I really feel that. I guess, mortality component when we're making things each year.
60, not everybody gets to look forward to 60, and that's because you started at such an early age. Yeah,
totally.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Watch this space.
But it also goes to show, like, 60 iterations is not a lot. That's, if you're, just to get back to I'm not a musician, but just to get back to that analogy, like, musicians are practicing, like, daily, right? Like, we only get maybe 60 if we're lucky,
right.
And you start really young, and you continue, and you're able to continue into an older age.
Yeah.
But what I was getting at was, when it comes to creativity and writing in particular, I actually have to, like, remove myself from time and place. And what I mean by that is my most insightful lines or whatever that I've written are like when I'm doing the dishes and I'm like, my brain is zoning out, or I'm going on a walk, or when I'm not necessarily thinking that hard about it. Sometimes it's being on a plane. I've written a couple of newsletters. Literally the last one I sent was at the airport. I usually type them up and send them immediately, which leads to some, I'm sure, grammatical errors, off the cuff. This is just like what I think in this moment.
It's very authentic. That's the beauty of it. You do feel like you're just hearing your musings. And I would encourage you to keep on going for that, because the authenticity then will always translate into the glass.
Right.
You can't hide who you are once you pour that in the glass. It's right there. And so folks, myself included, all of us want to be connected to, I think nowadays that's what it's all about. That's our biggest strength, is that story of who we are, but also I think you really convey well the products that you're using, the different resources, and that's really what we're spotlighting, and that's what you do well on paper in that way.
Appreciate that. It's fruit, flowers, and feelings. That's our tagline. That's what it is.
Beautiful thing. All right, let's talk about ciders made at Revel, and then we'll open perhaps this bottle that's sitting in front of us here.
So we do cider, we do some wine, we do a little bit of vermouth as well, which is the only bottle that I happen to have here today. But I am really excited about the vermouth project, so I think it'll be fun to taste this. But we had been making these ciders with different fruits and different botanicals. And actually the first couple of years, I really only used apples and pears. I had this almost handshake agreement with the cidery that I was renting space with, West Avenue Cider, that he was going to focus on like more fruited things and I was going to focus on more botanical things. We've since both played in both worlds.
West Avenue I really enjoy too. Wonderful makers.
So we stuck with really just focusing on botanicals those first few years, and then now we use a lot more fruits as well, of course. But it got to a point where we were putting like so many different flowers into a cider where I was just like, this is basically a couple steps removed from vermouth. It's a fortification piece and a sweetness piece that we're missing here, but vermouth ultimately, at its most basic level, is fruit fermented, aromatized with botanicals. Of course, vermouth, that word comes from the word for wormwood, and so some folks will say that if you don't have wormwood in it, it's not vermouth. I don't quite subscribe to that thinking. And actually, it was really funny. I was in Spain last year at a natural wine fair and brought some of my vermouth, and of course, Spain has a much more sophisticated vermouth drinking culture than we have in Canada. And like half of the people that tried it were like, I'm opening a vermouth bar. How do I buy this? And half of the people were like, there's no wormwood in here. This is not vermouth. And so it was really, fun to experience that. And I will still, die on the hill of calling these products vermouth. But this one in particular does not have any wormwood, which is
cool.
Yeah.
Big fancy glasses, because that's all we have here.
Yeah.
It works. Tariq is opening up the...
Just going to grab a little knife here just to get the wax off.
All right. So he's using my really ancient jackknife that I've had forever. It's traveled around the world with me.
This is actually like a good little thing, because we have these little... Do you have Smarties in America?
I don't know what a Smartie
Okay,
is.
they're M&Ms, but they're a little bit more this shape.
Oh,
but
and you pop it on.
And that's the easiest way to get rid of that. Some people will put the corkscrew through it, and I find that it just makes your corkscrew a little bit messy.
Yeah, and what is the purpose of the Smartie?
So this actually is like a legal requirement to cover the cork with something, and we didn't want to put little things of plastic on them, so we put little things of wax on them instead.
Perfect, okay.
It's just, a requirement in Canada. You can't sell a bottle like this. Or you can, but you can't sell them in any store that to go through that inspection, basically. Well, I actually haven't used a corkscrew like this in a little while. But
Twist it, yeah. Wow.
there we go.
Yeah, we love that sound. Okay. For those who aren't watching this little video, and I'm not sure how I'll have it on, but it's got a bit of a haze, almost lemon color, that kind of golden color, yellowish. And it's in a 750 ml bottle. So we're going to taste a little bit of this vermouth here.
This is called No Stone Unturned. And I'm just going to pour you a little splash because it is 17 or 18%.
Only, yeah, it's not even noon yet, at least not here.
Yeah, so it's 18%. This is one of the last bottles that I know of in existence, actually. I managed to wrangle it from a friend who had brought it because all of my bottles for CiderCon
Oh, wow. Thank
lost in the
you.
ether.
Wow. What a beautiful, fun label. It has a pear sticking out of the ground. There's all these little holes in the ground. I see an apple, and that looks like there's some grapes and a pear. It's almost like a Western scene, but with like gopher holes.
Yeah.
But it's all like fruit popping out, which is that's a very cool label.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine, Eva. She lives in Austin. Yeah, and she does these like dreamscapes for the Vermouth project. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.
This was our first attempt at using quince ever. But what we did was,
Yeah, you get definitely the floral of the quince.
Yeah. So quince are, and what I didn't realize before we got them in was there's an incredibly hard fruit, and our apple mill just couldn't deal with them.
Classic.
And so we put them through carbonic maceration for a couple of weeks to allow them to soften up. And then we were able to press them, but the quince are also very expensive. So what we ended up doing was we're like, okay, how can we like get a little bit more out of these quince? So we pressed them, we made a cider with the juice, and then we took the pomace and we put that like carbonic quince pomace into spirit for about 6 weeks, and we made this like quince infused spirit basically. And of course the carbonic maceration is going to elevate some of those naturally like fruitier and juicier notes of the quince too.
Absolutely.
So yeah, starting with carbonic quince-infused spirit, which we use to fortify the rest of this, which is a blend of primarily Gewürztraminer, which of course lends itself to that kind of like floral component as well. So you've got some pears, apples, and golden plums here as well. And then the botanicals are marigold, flowers that we grew, lemon balm.
So marigold. Wow,
Yeah, and
interesting.
I find marigold has a bit of like a citrusy element to it. So yeah, pairing that with the lemon balm was okay, like we can give this white vermouth a little bit of a citrusy component without actual citrus.
Yeah.
And that's like part of this idea of, hey, some of these things just grow around us already. But we don't necessarily maybe need to be importing lemons as much as I enjoy lemons.
Sure, yeah.
But if lemon balm grows really well here, then that feels like a more intentional and just true representation of terroir, right? I feel like so often in a kind of historic context, a winery might hand you a glass of Pinot Noir and be like that, this is a representation of where this is grown. And it feels a little disingenuous to say that because you've ignored 99% of the biodiversity that grows around you. So is it really? Having said that, like we do some single varietal ciders and I love drinking those things as well, but they're all part of this like larger picture and we get things in super seasonally and because we're working with a lot of these botanicals as well, it means that harvest is basically 8 to 10 months of the year. We're just constantly picking things depending on the season and yeah, I've managed to extend that into winter now with spruce resin and maple sap in some ways. But yeah, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. We can talk about the vermouth as well, though. The other botanicals in it.
I'm curious about the vermouth. How do most people drink this?
Yeah, so I would drink this over a big ice cube for the most part at home. However, you can totally put it into cocktails. This vermouth in particular, it doesn't have a ton of bitterness.
No.
And the other components, and we put the entire recipe on every bottle of vermouth, like all of the things that are in it. So you've got dandelion leaves and burdock root, which we had initially added to try and get a little bit of bitterness out of. And we didn't really get as much as we were looking for, but it ended up being like a really nice blend. And we're like, you know what, this is actually like really delightful where it is. Let's package it. And it actually reminds me much more of Lillet Blanc, which is like a French aperitif. Some people describe it as vermouth, but it's a little bit simpler than this, and it does have twice the amount of sugar as this. But yeah, I find that this works in any cocktail that you would use Lillet, and you might have to tweak things a little bit because, of course, it is a different product. But yeah, that's where it fits for me. It's a bit of a funny aperitif.
It's really, it bounces on your tongue. You're getting that citrusy there. Mm-hmm. That lemony and super smooth. You could feel, I have a very small sip here. It's, again, I don't know, like 11 o'clock in the morning or something, which is, this is a nice way to start the day. And certainly that citrus, that's, I think the quince kind of playing with our heads a little bit. Totally. And then you're saying lemon balm and burdock root, my goodness. For folks who don't know what burdock root is, he's out there like digging the soil, right? And those roots, they're buggers to pull out. They're very healthy though for you. So we're like, this is not doctor's voice, but this is like medicinal drink here in my mind.
That's what a lot of these aperitivos like started at.
Yeah,
really,
digestives, to heal the soul. So this beautiful label, and now I see, okay, it is like you're going to have a quince there.
Yeah, these are all the ingredients that
I see it, spinning around.
In it,
And I love that you have the base, what it is, and the botanicals. So let's just talk about carbonic maceration, which I have done myself. I'm not a commercial maker, of course. I've done it with wild grapes because we don't really have any way to break down the grapes. I was just telling this to Nicole at Santa Cruz Cider Company. She had gotten some grapes from Randall Graham, who's a winemaker in California, and fruit and from his Papa Lachum estate. And she was crushing it all by hand. And I'm like, shoot, just put that, take off the stems and do carbonic maceration. Let's explain to people who don't know what that is. How do you have a good explanation on that?
So it's carbonic maceration is a technique that really was like popularized by winemakers in Beaujolais. And they basically, what you do is you take your grapes or whatever fruit you want to use, really. You put it, ideally you're working with pretty clean fruit. So what I mean by that is it doesn't have a lot of rot. Yeah. So you want to sort the fruit first. But then you put it into a tank whole and you purge the tank with CO2. You've removed all of the oxygen by replacing it with CO2. And what actually is going to happen there is the fruit has enzymes in it that are actually going to start to ferment itself, because yeast actually will need oxygen to start fermentation. A lot of life needs oxygen. So managing oxygen is probably the most challenging part of any fermentation. But if you're going to remove all of this oxygen, then your yeast, even if they're on the fruit, because of course they are on the fruit, they aren't going to be able to start that fermentation because they do need oxygen to breathe. And you have these enzymes that are going to slowly start to turn the sugar into alcohol directly with going through the digestive process of a yeast cell doing that, which a yeast cell doing that is going to create other flavor compounds, but it's also going to chew through some flavor compounds too. And so allowing it to happen on its own allows you to preserve a lot of those more like kind of juicier, true to that like fruit components. And we like it for that reason.
I was happy when I saw you were doing that. I was like, wow, nice way to work with quince.
Totally, that it was really like...
Just chop it up, maybe? Did you chop it up a little bit before? No, you just threw it whole in,
We typically do a couple carbonic macerations a year. Of course, in our wine kind of program, it happens a fair bit. But we like carbonic ciders. Yeah. I've done it with Cider Red a couple of years in a row now. And it just like... bounces off your glass. It
really holds the fruit. You get the fruitiness. Absolutely delightful.
Thanks.
When people are checking out Revel Cider, and you only have a tasting room open for 3 months, but are they getting what you're doing, or do you have to do a lot of explaining now?
Both. Yeah. Some folks who maybe come from the natural wine world, like certainly it's like an easy thing to understand because it's not that far off from what's happening in that space. Or if they're coming at it from being a fan of lambic style beers and that world, like people really understand it. And that's like where we took a lot of inspiration from initially, because when we started doing spontaneous fermentations, like natural wine wasn't even a term. And I'll say both. Yeah, people in both of those worlds really get it. People that are like maybe fans of cider in particular, and in Ontario, we have a government monopoly on selling alcohol. And so if you go to the government stores, which are really the only stores that are allowed to sell alcohol, they allow grocery stores too, but the grocery stores, it all goes through the LCBO
Right.
as well. So it's really just like they opened a bunch of new LCBO locations, even though from a, I guess, consumer standpoint, it looks like they're, grocery stores are selling alcohol now. It's still the LCBO. But all of the ciders available there are much more kind of conventionally made and tend to have a fair bit of sweetness, and they are like a specific style. And you're not finding any wild fermented cider in the LCBO. And so folks that are coming just as being like fans of cider, that requires a little bit of more education on our part. And it's great because there's a couple of options that, you know, especially now that we have the tasting room and we have a couple of taps, I can be like, okay, try these two things. If you like them, then we can like continue on this path. And if you don't, that's okay. But this is the style.
Yeah.
This is what you're getting yourself into before you go and spend some money on a bottle.
Sure, start from there. So where do you recommend people starting from there? If they're new to you, they're listening to this episode, and they're curious. What's a good starter point?
Yeah, there's one product that we do that we try and make in large enough batches that it's always available, because again, things are made once a year. But it's called soif. And soif, it just means thirst in French. But soif is it's a blend of actually a couple ciders, and it does take us 2 years to make, but we'll let the apples ferment 1 year, and then the following year, because again, we're getting stuff in when it's in season, the following summer we'll get our cherries and strawberries in, and we'll add those to 2 separate tanks of cider that had, again, fermented the year previous. Then that fall, we'll get some wine grapes in, we'll press the grapes and take that wine and either make wine with it or either leave it as wine or turn it into vermouth, whatever we're doing. And then we'll rack the cider with the cherries and the cider with strawberries together onto those wineskins. We'll leave them for another 6 months. So now we're in year 2 of when we started, and it's ready to bottle.
Yeah, you're giving it some time to condition into it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But I mean, if you're going to work with the seasons, like that also... Yeah, actually, it's funny because I was on a panel here at CiderCon talking about co-ferments, and I feel like that is, what people know Revel for, but I don't always understand how you are co-fermenting things, literally getting the fruit in fresh and letting a cherry and an apple ferment together, because in my mind, those things are available at different times of the year. I'm like, how is that actually happening?
Freezing fruit.
Yeah, you can freeze it too.
Which breaks it down a little bit,
And maybe you don't lose anything freezing it, but maybe you do, and I don't know. We really just work with fresh.
Fresh ferments at the same time.
Yeah, exclusively.
The season,
we're not freezing anything. And
so then you aren't really doing other berries in that way.
Yeah, we're bringing berries, but they come in the following year. Because apples are really the last fruit of the year.
But cherries are more earlier where you are.
That's right, yeah.
Because you could really get fruit from anywhere in the world at any time, but you're doing all locally sourced.
It's all Ontario as well. So,
which is another key point to know about Revel. It's not bringing cherries from Chile.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, and
strawberries, whatever.
I'm sure cherries in Chile taste great, but I want to taste, the Chilean cider that's made with them. I don't want to use them myself.
Because that's terroir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're really focusing on that.
Yeah.
And do you ship to the U.S.?
We do, yeah. My goodness, we finally figured out how to launch an online store in America, which was a whole
small
other
task.
thing. Yeah. American alcohol legislation everywhere is challenging, but the American system is its own special thing.
This is true.
But we have figured out we can now ship to 44 states, which I think are the kind of the typical 44 states that allow it.
Yep. And across Canada too, because we have a lot of Canadian listeners from British Columbia, Vancouver, out to Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia.
Yeah, and the EU as well, actually.
Fantastic!
Yeah,
wow.
that goes through our importer, the
Fantastic.
But the link is in our Instagram bio if you wanna find that. But soif is available, I believe, in all of those, on all of those websites. So that is a good place to start, but also we certainly plan on, we're continually releasing things.
This has just been so fascinating, and getting to meet you in person, sit down and taste your delicious vermouth. And
it's been so sweet to chat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time today. And I wish you the best of luck, and we're going to be watching what Revel is doing, and hoping that 2024 is you get to nail down some of your direction, and so when we meet again, we'll have some good updates to share with the listeners.
Thank you, Rita. I hope so too.
You just heard from Tariq Ahmed of Revel Cider, based in Ontario, and this here is episode 405, so if you go to the show notes, you'll be able to find links, and that will direct you to your online store possibilities to get some of his cider and Co-ferments your way. Find this episode number 405 with Tariq at ciderchat.com. And while you're there, if you are interested in cider travel, well, there are just a couple seats left on the French cider tour going to Paris, Normandy, and Brittany. We're going to be spending 2 days in Domfronte, which is on either sides of Normandy and Brittany. It's like squished in between. That is the Perry-Pear region. We go in the fall just so we could taste the fruit, and it will blow your mind. You will wonder, wow, why don't we have these kind of pears here? Well, it's because they grow in certain regions of the world, like France and the UK, and they're almost like a UNESCO World Heritage Site all their own, I think, each Perry-Pear, because they're about 350 years old or so, which is old. And that is just some of the fun that we'll be having. Go to Totally Cider Tours tab at ciderchat.com. Pull down the tab, you see French Cider Tour, all the info there. The price for this tour is going up in April. And with that, I leave you here. This is Rio Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider. We like palms. We love orchards and having fun. There is a reason.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider. We like palms. We like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason.
There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Oh yes, there is.
There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh yeah.
We like cider.
Oh yes, we do.
We like palms.
Oh yes, we do.
We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There is a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh yeah.
We like cider.
Ba-da-da-dum.
We like palms.
Oh yes, we do.
We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!